Good morning, everybody. Still getting myself ready. Nikki Burnett here. Today's Taste Life Nutrition Radio and Podcast streaming live on kuhsdenver.com, where I want to dig in. Do you know sometimes the stuff that you're wearing just doesn't work? My belt just keeps coming unbuckled. Anyway, so I don't want to be messing with that the entire time I'm sitting here. But anyway, today we're going to do a deep dive into hormones. I think that this is, we've talked a lot about hormones in the past, but I think that there's still a large piece missing that that I think needs to be discussed. It needs to be understood. So us as women, whatever phase in life we are in, this is we know how to ask questions, and not just leave it up to somebody else to make decisions for us and tell us that they know what's best. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. And so I want to give context around hormones as communicators. I want to give context around how that plays a role in every part of our biochemical functionality, right? And so I think that this is going to be, it's important not to just sit back and assume that the things that are going on is just bad luck or age or genetics, although genetics plays a role in a lot of these things, and we're going to get into that. But I think that we need to, kind of going back to what I always say, is we got to always ask the question why. A lot of times the answers might go back to our hormones, but we still want to go deeper than that, right? We still want to have an understanding of what's going on, why it's happening, and how it's impacting other areas of the body. We're not made in a vacuum. We're not made as bits and pieces and parts that don't intermingle, right? We're made where every piece of us is impacted by every other piece of us, and we need to keep that in mind. Just as, you know, we are impacted by our environment, we're impacted by other people around us. So there are lots and lots of things to take into consideration, but having some basic understandings and how to ask the right questions, I think is going to be really helpful for a lot of people. And, you know, a lot of this too comes from me. This comes from my own journey, but then the journey that I go on with my clients and my patients. And there are patterns that I see, which is why I really wanted to have this conversation, because some of these patterns are really bad patterns and we can stop them in their tracks. So anyway, let's jump in here in a minute, but of course, as always, we start the show with gratitude, because gratitude can change the world. And today, what am I grateful for today? So many things, of course, but I think I'm grateful that I feel my muscles. I did a CrossFit class back, I think it was just the day before yesterday. Yesterday I just did a Hot Works class, which is awesome, by the way, if you like sauna and working out. But the day before I did a CrossFit class, and my legs and my bum are screaming at me. So sitting down is super fun. Walking up and down stairs is super fun. But I'm grateful for the ability to move. I'm grateful for working hard. I think it's really cool stuff. There was something else I was thinking about, but anyway, I can't think of what it is. But just grateful for grateful for being 60 degrees outside today in February in Colorado. That's amazing. Not everybody's grateful for that one, but I can't help but to be. So I know we need some moisture, but this is pretty awesome as far as I'm concerned. So, okay, let's dig in a little bit. Oh my goodness, I am going to be messing with this belt the entire time. So let's dig into, maybe we start with why I wanted to talk about this. You probably, if you follow me at all, you already know where I am in my life phase, right? So I am newly officially menopausal, and I tell you that I'm surrounded by women who are perimenopausal or menopausal, but I also am, there are lots of women around me who I'm working with who are, maybe they are, looking to get pregnant, or they're just going through their cycles and having such a hard time. I've worked with multiple clients who who have been admitted into the emergency department because their pain is so intense. This is not okay. It's not normal. And we have to start to understand the why behind these intense symptoms that we experience. And so this whole show is, there's going to certainly be a leaning toward perimenopause and menopause because of the extreme hormone shifts that are going on, and so much of a lack of understanding about that. But I do want to make sure that we're including those, you know, who are struggling in other ways, whether it's, you know, PCOS, that kind of stuff. So I think what we want to, or one of the things that we look at in, back up to me for a moment, not to make it about me, but I think the context is important because my little piece of my story, this is, you know, many years of me, you know, learning and trying to understand the body through my own lens, right? And dig into learning what my body is telling me. This is what I tell people all the time. We want to learn what our body's, what its language is. We want to be able to understand it. We want to partner with it. We don't want to fight it. And so I say that to people because that's what I'm doing every single day and have been doing it for many years. So I start going through this, you know, perimenopause, menopause phase. I'm doing my labs. I start getting these hot flashes. So I am under the assumption that, if, you know, and I have them really well controlled. I take, it's a company called Bezwecken. I've been taking their progesterone and their estradiol, pretty small amounts, and it's totally fine. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, my hormones are going to be pretty good. So then I start testing, and I tested I think it was about 3 months apart last year at the end of the year, and my hormones were not fine. So gratefully, thankfully, I know how to control the hot flashes, but what else am I missing? What else is going on? Could I serve my memory better by optimizing my hormones? Could I serve my cognitive function? Any of the little aches and pains that I have, right? All of these things, what can be better? So this is where I am now, is okay, I have this understanding, I'm looking at my labs, my hormones are certainly not optimized, and I have someone who I'm going to help me to optimize my hormones. So to be continued on my own journey, but in doing these deep dives for myself and then for my clients as well, the patterns that I see, and I want to talk about this piece of it because because I see it so regularly, right? And I saw it in my own labs. You can probably assume I'm a pretty healthy person. I eat well. I eat according to my specific genetics. I've gone pretty deep into that. We've talked about that a lot in the past. And I look at my labs. They come back. My glucose is elevated, not significantly, but more than I want it to be. My lipids are elevated. Now, I also know that can have something to do with my ApoB status, which is a genetic. It's a genetic polymorphism that everybody has, but everybody has a different variation of it. So mine is not the greatest when it comes to lipids, so I'm aware of it, and I work along with that. So, when you do your labs, it brings up questions. It should bring up questions. That's important that it brings up questions, and it's important that you try to get those questions answered so you're not just assuming that you know, right? And it's also important that you look at labs from a functional lens, and I just mean that because if we look at labs from the lens of conventional medicine, the ranges are so broad that things just don't come up, and so we're not optimizing. And the ranges are not optimal ranges by far. So we want to look at those from a functional perspective. Okay, so digging deeper into this pattern that I see, had I gone to a functional medicine, had I gone to a conventional medicine practitioner who looked at my labs, saw that my glucose is going up and my lipids are going up, Probably at that point, nothing would have been done with my glucose. It's not that high. But my lipids are like, oh, they're starting to creep up there. Why is that happening? So there would have been no conversation around my genetics. There would have been no conversation around anything except we need to put you on statins. I was told when I was in my 20s that I needed to be put on statins. Are you kidding me? So think about that, because statins interfere with hormone production, right? What would have happened if I'd actually said, oh, okay, you know best, I'm going to be put on statins in my 20s. Imagine, because of the cognitive impacts that it has, because of my ApoE status, because of what it would do to my hormone production, imagine who I would be today had I said, okay, I'm going to go be put on a statin. So imagine me now at 54 next month. Provider says, okay, you need to be put on statins. I decide to go ahead and be put on statins. What's that going to do? So I already have low estrogen. Estrogen is going to impact, we'll dig into this, but it's going to impact all these things that are on my labs. So then I'm put on a statin, which is going to interfere with hormone production even more. It's also going to interfere with my cognitive performance, which low estrogen is also going to do. And I'm setting myself up for the rest of my life in a place where potentially I don't think well, I don't have a good memory, I don't have good focus, I'm on metformin, I'm on continued statins, right? And then what happens later on is I think I'm crazy, or I think I'm depressed, or I have anxiety, or I'm pushing Alzheimer's disease, which is my ApoE status, because I came to this I didn't ask the questions, and I didn't dig deeper into the why behind my labs, and I didn't optimize my hormones, right? So what if, whatever phase of life we're in, if we have our hormones optimized, what if then we start to see our labs are then normalized? And so this is the stuff that we need to really, really pay attention to, because the pattern is your lipids are elevated, we put you on a statin. Your glucose is elevated, your A1C is elevated, you're insulin resistant, we put you on metformin. Instead of bringing optimal health to the person, okay? So, we kind of, so things that I hear a lot, again, part of this pattern is, and this happened just yesterday, right? So, the diet is perfect, everything looks really good, you're training really hard, you're working out, you're meditating, you're trying to sleep well, but maybe your sleep is not optimal, right? But things have changed, and so what we see, and then your body composition, this is me, for sure, body composition changes. So you're doing all of the right things, and you're doing all of the things that you've been doing for however many years you've been doing them, right? And the things start to go wonky, and you just get really frustrated. It's super frustrating, right? And so, again, glucose goes up, lipids go up, and you're like, what is going on? And so that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, is this isn't about aging. Although our body is aging, because our hormone status is going to change. We're going to stop producing eggs. We're going to, this is just what we go through as women. It's life. But the signals that we have had over this period of time start going wonky. Everything else starts going wonky, or they go super low, so there is no signal. So the way that I explained it to my client yesterday was, it's like the body is used to speaking, it only speaks English, and then somebody comes in and starts speaking Spanish to you. You're like, whoa, okay, there's a word I understood, but most of this I'm not getting. So it's a very broken communication. And if the body is not understanding what to do and how to do it, because hormones are not optimal, then things are going to start to break, and things are going to become dysfunctional, and things are going to become problematic, and these symptoms come up, right? Including joint pain, weight loss, memory issues, cognitive performance, you name it. All of these things can happen because of hormone fluctuations and low hormones, right? What I'm not going to get into today is hormones that are, I don't think I am, hormones that are too high, right? Because I think we have way too much to cover. But probably should say though that hormones can be super wonky if you don't already know this, because of the toxins in the environment. They're endocrine disruptors, so they create disruption within our hormones because of the toxins, because of the pesticides and the herbicides, the things we put on our skin, right? All of these things. We've talked about this multiple times, so I'm not going to dig into it any deeper today. But managing what you're putting in your body, on your body, in your environment, so you're not continuing to perpetuate the dysregulation of the hormones because of these exogenous factors, right? These factors from outside of the body. Okay, so when we have hormones that are starting to fluctuate, or that are fluctuating for a number of reasons, there's the signal that's going on, but there's also how we interpret those signalings based on our genetic makeup. So it makes it super complicated, and I can't get too deep into this because it is super complicated, but it's having an understanding of how we layer all this information together, right? So we come in, and I talk about this a lot, but we come in, we look at your symptoms, we look at your labs, we look at your genetics, your labs including your hormones. We put all these things together so we can have a clear understanding of, at least a much clearer understanding of what we need to do to help to manage, to mitigate, to optimize, right? And so let's talk about lipids and glucose. So we have estrogen receptors all over our body. Men and women both do. Obviously, men don't use estrogen the way that we do. For women, estrogen is protective. It is protective of brain function. So a couple of things that it does is it upregulates LDL receptors. So not LDL, but LDL receptors. So when estrogen is upregulating LDL receptors, it means that we're utilizing our LDL properly, right? It improves ApoB clearance, which is a apolipoprotein B, a marker that is highly influenced by diet and lifestyle. And if it's elevated, it's a big cardiovascular risk factor. So we want to be able to clear this ApoB, right? So it regulates VLDL, which is very low density lipoprotein. And so it also enhances HDL functionality. So HDL, LDL, so much in this, but HDL or LDL brings cholesterol to the tissues. It is very important. We must have LDL. Statins decrease LDL. We have to have LDL. Do not let anyone tell you that you need your LDL to be as low as possible. This is dangerous. Literally, it's dangerous. We need LDL to be in a good spot, a good normal spot. We need inflammatory markers low because it's the inflammation that impacts LDL. It's not LDL. It's the inflammation. Okay, we've got to keep our inflammatory markers low. So then estrogen also reduces hepatic glucose output, right? So glucose being produced by the liver, and so if we are if we're reducing hepatic output, right, so we're reducing our glucose levels, so that decreases the glucose levels in the blood. Sorry, my words are not working for me. So low estrogen. Anyway, so as estrogen declines, LDL clearance slows, so which means LDL is going to go up. ApoB rises, cardiovascular risk factor. Triglycerides may increase depending on the person and depending on genetics, right? So we might have LDL go up in some people. We might have triglycerides go up in some people. So it depends. A lot of this can be based on ApoE, not B, but ApoE status. And then fasting glucose may drift upward. So this can happen in all women who are struggling with low estrogen. And so again, going back to, if we just look at labs and we don't start asking the question why, then we're not going to really get to the root cause, and we're going to do things that probably aren't going to be beneficial to us, like the drugs, right? So ApoE plays a big role in lipid expression. ApoE, I can't get too deep into this, but there are multiple subtypes of ApoE. So you've got your 2s and your 3s and your 4s. And so this was a good way of putting it as I was putting my notes together. You can think of estrogen as a metabolic moderator, and then you think of ApoE as your baseline lipid wiring. So all of these subtypes. And then when estrogen declines, your underlying lipid wiring becomes more visible, right? So it's so interesting that estrogen is that moderator. So whatever we have the potential for because of our ApoE status, or maybe some other SNPs that are impacted by estrogen, which are many, as estrogen goes down, then our potential for these things can go up, right? And so you start to see what actually is happening or what could happen. And maybe we just look at it as the SNP is turning on. That's what we talk about all the time. So if estrogen is not there to help to regulate, these SNPs turn on, so our glucose goes up, our LDL goes up, right? And so what can we do then to manage that? We bring in the moderator back in, right? So we bring estrogen back in. And so we have, so if we look at ApoE3, it moderates, gosh, I can't talk. So expression by type, right? So ApoE3, shows a moderate LDL rise. It can be a mild ApoB increase. It can be responsive to lifestyle and hormone stabilization, and is not immune to estrogen-related shifts. So ApoE3 is sort of your it's your middle of the road. Most people are in ApoE3, okay? So then you have ApoE2. So your LDLs may be lower. You might then, though, need to watch your triglycerides, right, and your remnant particles. And as estrogen declines, it may then reveal the triglyceride sensitivity, right? So if you're in ApoE2, it's less about your like your LDL and HDL, and more about your triglycerides. Where with ApoE4, somebody like me, it's going to be more about your LDL and your ApoB, and it's more reactive to saturated fat. So we've talked a lot about that. So I always watch my saturated fat intake, and whatever saturated fat I eat, it's a healthy saturated fat. Okay. I don't know what that's about. What is that, Henry? There's chimes in the background. I mean, it's beautiful, but all right. Okay, thank you.
I don't know what that was.
I don't know. Alrighty. So then also for people like me who have this ApoE4 status, I might experience, and I have, to a degree, right? My lipids are not in a scary place. Now, some people might think that the numbers are a scary number. I am not as concerned about those numbers as many people are. But I also am super aware, and I'm super careful with what I'm doing. So, again, this is a whole discussion that we'll probably need to get in at another time, but I have the potential of experiencing sharpened lipid shifts post-menopause, which is where I am. So, obviously, from the time of my 20s, my lipids have had some elevation to them. But as long as I'm watching my inflammatory markers, I don't worry about those elevated lipids. As long as they are, if I'm looking at LDL, and it is, if it's elevated, but my CRP is low, and my oxidized LDL are low, and my small dense LDL are low, then I'm not worried about this LDL marker. Okay, again, a whole different conversation, but it's important to know that there's a lot more to this than what we typically see on a typical comprehensive metabolic panel when we look at lipids. So just looking at LDL is not going to give us the entire story, okay? The thing that we need to keep in mind, so those of us who have been told we need statins or who are on statins, the lower your LDL, the higher your risk of stroke. LDL is protective. We need to have LDL. But we've got to look at the whole picture. We can't just look at one marker and assume we do or don't need a statin. Okay? So, for women who experience, estrogen-related lipid shifts, we have to understand a big part of it, and I think an important part of understanding, when estrogen is declining, is understanding how genotypes influence that shift, and how everything influences everything, right? So let's go and let's talk about brain, estrogen and brain, or cognitive health. We hear a lot women who start to go through perimenopause. They're like, my memory's going, my words aren't working for me. I've always been super smart and I don't have the capacity I used to have, right? So we start to have these shifts in estrogen in our 40s. We usually become perimenopausal in our 40s. It could be in our 30s for some of us, right? And so we start to become concerned, especially if we have that ApoE4 genotype. Well, if I have an ApoE4 genotype, am I starting early Alzheimer's, right? That's a big problem too. And you don't have to have that genotype to start early Alzheimer's or to have Alzheimer's, right? There are a lot of factors that go into Alzheimer's, so it's not just that, but that's a big marker. So, we start to think we're going crazy. Depression sets in, potentially anxiety sets in, because we're not protecting our brain with the amount of estrogen that we need that is brain protective. And so there is the GLUT3 expression that estrogen enhances, that impacts brain energy. There's mitochondrial ATP production that estrogen enhances. Synaptic plasticity, which is the positive changes in the brain, and microglial regulation. So these are all estrogen's job in the brain. These aren't going to happen if we don't have enough estrogen. So decline of estrogen may contribute to brain fog, cognitive fatigue, sleep fragmentation, okay? And so if we bring in the, other types of genes, again, going back to the ApoE gene, it influences lipid transport in neurons. And some genotypes are more sensitive to hypometabolism, right? So slowed metabolism. And so then we've talked about the COMT gene, so the COMT gene. So it regulates dopamine and estrogen metabolites. Okay, so the slower variants of the COMT gene may experience heightened stress, anxiety shifts, sleep fragility, post-estrogen decline. So again, think about those of you who are perimenopausal or menopausal. Are some of these things you? Have you done your genetic testing to understand what your genotype is and how it's going to impact estrogen and vice versa? Okay? All right, let's get into insulin sensitivity and glucose. So my glucose, last time I did my numbers, so I think it was in, I'm going to be super open with this, I think it was in November that I did my last set of labs. Just coming off of a week with all of my friends on the lake in Dallas. So I usually eat pretty well, but I had my fair share of wine, for sure. And so my glucose was at 107, which has never happened before. Even I did my labs 3 months prior to that point, and I think my glucose was 90. Ideally, we want glucose 75, 80, 85, okay? So fasting glucose, coming off of a week of having some good fun with my friends, but still my glucose was at 107. So multiple reasons probably why that was happening, but it still is creeping up, okay? So estrogen, its role in managing blood glucose is it improves muscle insulin sensitivity. It reduces hepatic glucose output, and it supports mitochondrial glucose use. So glucose is part of what we use for energy, but we don't want too much of it. That's a problem too, right? So after estrogen declines, fasting glucose may rise, visceral fat may increase, hello, and insulin responses may change. So we can bring in different genetics. I'm not gonna dig into these different genes that can play a role, but they can influence incretin signaling. They may explain why rising glucose in lean women. There are melatonin receptor variants that can be impacted by low estrogen. And so late eating can be problematic, right? So there are these two polymorphisms that can play a role and increase the expression, sort of that negative expression, if our estrogen is too low, okay? So if we look at fat distribution and body composition, let's see what I got here, make sure I'm hitting everything I want to hit. All right, so this is what, for me personally, my fat sits on my butt and my legs. So it's not my upper body, it's all lower body. I get muscle in my arms, I have muscle in my abs. I don't have a lot of muscle in my bum or in my legs, right? It just is has always been just where I gain excess weight. Super frustrating, so it's always been something that has been a focus for me. But what we need to remember and keep in mind for those of us who carry weight in our abs, in our core, it's super metabolically active. It's much more metabolically active than, say, the excess tissue that I might have in my legs and my bum. Interesting, yes. So that for those of you who carry it there, that's, like for me, I have to be super aware of my ApoE4 status. We want to be super aware of this activity that is going on in that adipose, my words again, right? In that adipose tissue that sits in our core and surrounds our organs. So, fat is super hormonally active, so it does produce estrogen, so it does tend to shift into that hormone production as we're losing that production from our ovaries. And so as estrogen regulates fat partitioning, a decline in estrogen can shift toward more abdominal fat, right? So even somebody like me, I noticed that I was getting thicker. What is happening here? And so it can increase for those who are super prone to it, that visceral adiposity, right? That core that surrounds the organs, that tissue that surrounds the organs, and it can increase IL-6 and TNF alpha signaling. So those are sort of localized inflammatory markers. And it's interesting too, because as I was doing my own research, my CRP, which is an inflammatory marker, is super low. It's exactly where I want it to be. But what I didn't test is the IL-6 and the TNF alpha. And so that would be on my next round of labs. Of course, I'm already on this trajectory where I'm assuming that those are elevated, which has been what's been increasing my symptoms. And so I would expect that they'll probably maybe be normalized, but they may not be for my next round of labs. We'll see. So let's see, I already said that. So if we were to layer in genetics, right, we've got a couple of these SNPs that have the potential to influence ghrelin, which is your satiety hormone, and abdominal storage. Also, estrogen decline may amplify the central redistribution. So we've kind of already hit that a couple of times, but knowing that there are specific markers that push that. Another one that influences adiponectin and impacts fat oxidation and insulin sensitivity. So knowing where you are in your phase in life, knowing your health status and knowing your genes can really help you to optimize where you are, wherever you are in your phase in life. It's pretty cool stuff. It's really fascinating. So let's look at muscles and mitochondria. So estrogen supports satellite cell activation, mitochondrial density, recovery capacity, and fat oxidation efficiency. So we kind of already hit on that one. So what happens? So fat can sit outside of the cell and become oxidized. So there's carnitine is the only amino acid that has the ability to pull fat into the cell and into the mitochondria to be used to create ATP. So ATP being our energy source, right? Our mitochondria being our little energy engines. If they're not functioning properly, then they're not putting out energy. If we're not bringing in fat into the cell, then we're not going to be putting out energy, right? So the things that we tend to experience is decline in energy, right? A decline in, if we have mitochondrial dysfunction, if that mitochondria is not producing the energy that we need, it can be anywhere, right? It can be heart, it can be brain, it can be, we have mitochondria from probably hundreds to millions of mitochondria in every cell of our body. We use our brain, we use our endocrine, our ovaries and testes, our heart. These are so active. They need lots of mitochondria because they need lots of energy. What happens if we don't have that energy? Things start to slow down, symptoms start to happen. It's no fun, for sure. So if estrogen declines, right, so we have muscle loss accelerates, recovery slows. I'm thinking about my sore bum right now, but it was a really hard workout. And then resting metabolic rate drops. So, then we're going to start to put on weight. And then we're going to start to produce more estrogen from our fat cells, which is going to put on more weight, right? So then we layer in genetics again. So we have, there's one, some of you may have heard of this one. This is a more well-known, but it's the SOD2, superoxide dismutase. So it influences mitochondrial oxidative stress buffering and reduced antioxidant resilience. So estrogen decline may amplify fatigue. All right, so sleep, right? It's another one that we see happens so often. Our sleep just goes crazy wonky haywire. So we may not be able to go to sleep, or we wake up and we can't go back to sleep, or we're just not sleeping at all and we can't figure out why. And we're doing all of the things, right? We're shutting down, and you name the things that we're told to do, the blue light screens, the glasses, the meditation and the prayer, all of these things that we try to do to make sure that we're going to get good sleep, and we don't really. And it's hard to function. And what happens if it happens over and over and over and over again? Functions, it's that vicious cycle where function becomes super disruptive, and we just start to think we're going crazy, right? So estrogen regulates thermoregulation, right? Metabolism. GABA, which is our calming neurotransmitter. So we've talked a lot about glutamate in the past, how glutamate, it's in the same pathway. So glutamate is supposed to go down the pathway. So glutamate's excitatory, right? So if we have too much glutamate, it's inflammatory to the brain, and it's excitatory, right? So we're just sort of always sitting at this excitatory spot. So some people who are sensitive to MSG, right, monosodium glutamate, so they're sitting in this excitatory place. So it's not a good place to be, and it's, like I said, it's super inflammatory. What's supposed to happen is it's supposed to move down the pathway to GABA, which is calming. So as long as it's moving down that pathway, we're in a good spot. And so estrogen regulates GABA. It also regulates serotonin. So start putting more pieces of the puzzle together, right? We want to look at gut function, because serotonin, 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. If we have a good, healthy microbiome, if we have a robust microbiome, then we're going to have good serotonin production. But if we don't, And then we're also low in estrogen, our serotonin's not going to be in a good spot. So it also then regulates cortisol rhythm. Elevated cortisol is, chronically elevated cortisol is inflammatory. Now, normal cortisol spikes and dips are fine and totally normal, it's the way it's supposed to be, but we can't have it chronically elevated because that's hugely problematic and inflammatory. So if estrogen regulates these things, if it drops, what's going to happen, right? It's going to raise IL-6 and TNF alpha. It's going to increase fasting glucose. It's going to alter leptin and ghrelin, which are hunger and satiety hormones. So we start to wonder why we get more cravings. We start to wonder why we're hungry more often. We start to, we start to question everything that we're about because we're not the same as we used to be, right? So then we add in another genetic polymorphism that has the potential of altering glucose response late in the evening, right? So we never were snackers in the evening before, and we become snackers in the evening. So estrogen plays a role in that. Okay. So this is one, these are, let me look at this. So I think I'm afraid of getting too deep into this. There are specific ratios that we can look at in labs that can play a role in how things are functioning. I'm afraid that's going to get too deep. So I think that we're going to skip over that today. I don't want to go too deep. I want to be able to have this belt not fall off of me is really what I want. I'm going to skip that. So let's move over. Let's talk a little bit about methylation, because methylation plays a role in gene expression. It happens in every cell in the body, and it's also sort of the new tag word, right? Methylation. What's going on with methylation? I have the MTHFR gene, right? But there are more genes than just MTHFR and methylation. We've got, MTHFR is folate, whereas MTRR is also, is that a folate? Then we've got B12 transport genes, right? So, but they are all enzymes that happen in different parts of the methylation pathway. And so methylation impacts lipid regulation. It also impacts neurotransmitter balance. It impacts DNA repair and detoxification. And so when it comes to looking at labs that may look normal, we still have to go back and we need to understand methylation. We need to understand our methylation potential. And we need to understand that just because our CRP, this is me, just because our CRP is not elevated, is there an inflammatory process going on somewhere due to estrogen levels being low, right? And so that doesn't matter to me. Okay, so sorry, I'm getting a little sidetracked here on what I think is going to move us forward in the conversation. So I think let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are usually not put together when it comes to labs. Because in order to start to ask smart questions, we need to question the labs that are coming back. And so a couple of the things that we want to make sure that we're looking at. So when we can look at estrogen, we can look at progesterone, we can look at testosterone, we can look at the three different estrogens. Usually we're looking at estradiol, but there are three different estrogens that we can look at. But the things that we need to make sure that we're also focusing on is sex hormone binding globulin. That's an important one. So we need to make sure that we're looking at, back it up. Sex hormone binding globulin. So it does a few things. So it looks at total hormones versus active hormones. It determines free versus bound, right? So free, and then variants that influence free testosterone plus estradiol variability. And so these ratios can matter more than the isolated values. And so this was a big learning lesson for me. So I think I've said this in the past that, just to be super open, my sex drive was in the tank, man. It stunk. So what I did in the wrong way, but now I know, what I did was I went and I got testosterone pellets. Now, it helped the sex drive for sure. It was awesome. But doing testosterone, HRT as testosterone, without also understanding your estradiol levels can be problematic. Doing estrogen without doing progesterone can also be problematic. So we can't look at these things in a vacuum. We can't look at hormones like they don't impact everything else, like they don't work together, like they don't work as a team in that communication process for us, because they do, which is why I'm, having my levels optimized is going to be super important for every part of me, not just, the sex drive. So really important to know the ratios so we have a clearer picture and a clearer understanding. I think though too, there's confusion around the delivery system for these types of hormones. So we've got pellets, we've got oral, we've got the creams, right? And so I think that for people, and for the need, the delivery system matters. And it's important to understand our needs so we know what delivery system we need and what it is that we're supporting. So if we're looking at oral estrogen, so it goes through liver metabolism. So it can alter clotting factors, and it can also influence triglycerides. So do we want to take an oral estrogen? For some, maybe, but for some, if it's going to alter clotting factors, which can be genetic, if it's going to influence triglycerides, can be genetic, right? Those are the things that we want to keep in mind to understand what it is that is going to be best for us to best optimize. Transdermal bypasses the liver, right? So there's more physiologic signaling with transdermal, right? So the patch. So we look at, there are different pathways, so these liver detox pathways. So a lot of us who have done our genetics, we know our liver detox pathways, we know our estrogen clearance pathways. And so we want to understand these because they also can influence the metabolic pathways, which means we clear them well or we don't clear them well, right? And so we don't want to hold on to our estrogens that we need to get rid of, but we want to hold on to the ones that we need, right? So we have to have our detox pathways open and clear and functioning optimally, which means knowing our genetics. It means optimizing our estrogen levels, our progesterone levels, our testosterone levels if we need it, and working them all together. Okay, so there's another one that, so when we're talking about methylation, what I didn't talk about with homocysteine, and I think it's an important one to take in mind, or to keep in mind when we're looking at our inflammatory markers, because it's, in most cases, it's a really simple marker to manage and to get under control, but if we don't, it's a huge, huge problem. So homocysteine is a part of the methylation cycle, and I apologize, I kind of jumped around a little bit. I should have hit on this when I was talking about methylation. But homocysteine can be elevated. It also can be low. We see it rarely. We see it low, but it's also a problem if it's too low. So what we see in lab ranges, in conventional lab ranges, is that methylation, it's, some will say that I think it's out of range at like 13 or 15. Weird, right, that different labs have different ranges.
Unknown caller.
It's so weird. Put it on Do Not Disturb. Anyway, so huge problem. That's why, again, going back to we need. Goodness gracious. Some days, right? Some days things are just kind of a mess. Anyway, going back to functional ranges and homocysteine, even the functional ranges for homocysteine are not optimal. So according to Dr. Del Bredesen, so he's sort of our, functional medicine Alzheimer's expert. So if you know anybody, refer Del Bredesen's information, his book. He's got a great website. You want to know this stuff. But homocysteine, over 11, according to Del Bredesen, there's a 100% chance of cognitive decline. So again, we put that in the context with estrogen going low and impacting cognitive health, right? And if we have our methylation is off and our homocysteine is elevated. So I'll say this from my own personal perspective is, I have the least aggressive MTHFR gene. Like, it's no big deal. It plays a little bit of role in my folate metabolism, but not much. But if I'm not watching it, I can tell when my methylation is off, right? Now, homocysteine, my last marker, my homocysteine went up to 9, which was pretty rare. It's been sitting at like 6 or 7. But there are other things that influence that marker, right? So yes, the methylation pathways influence that marker, but so can oxidative stress. And so, again, going back to all of the different things that play a role in different markers, creatine can influence homocysteine. So I want to make sure that what I'm doing is managing that marker, because it's a cognitive inflammatory marker, but it's also a cardiovascular inflammatory marker, which is what most people look at, right? So most cardiologists, if we're looking at managing heart function and heart health and that, cardiovascular health as a whole, they're only looking at it in the perspective of cardiovascular. They're not looking at it in the perspective of cerebrovascular. And we have, obviously it's connected, right? But we have to look at it as an inflammatory marker for both. And so making sure that you're getting your methylated B vitamins for those who need it, right? Not everybody needs methylated B vitamins. Sometimes those can be problematic for some people, right? You got to know your genetics, or at least your symptoms and how to mitigate your symptoms. But we want to understand the forms of the different nutrients that we need in order to optimize that cognitive function, but also the cardiovascular function. So as you start to move up, you want to learn, if you're starting to move up, you want to learn what's playing a role in that, how you can mitigate it. Is it as simple as taking your methylated Bs or other forms of B vitamins? Do you have oxidative stress and inflammation that needs to come down, right? So looking at those is going to play a huge role in your cognitive function as you age. So putting all of these pieces and parts together, when we're looking at labs, when we're looking at symptoms, when we're looking at how hormones influence our labs, takes us back to understanding how to ask good questions and not just saying, oh yeah, I need to be put on a statin, or oh yeah, I need to be put on metformin. We got to ask the question why. And one of the simplest questions, I think, is my estrogen optimized? Do I need to also take progesterone, which usually is yes. Did I say testosterone? Progesterone. You need progesterone with your estrogen. and is it going to help you to do a little bit of testosterone? Maybe, right? This is why we go to the people who are the experts in hormones, right? So what we want to find when we're looking for people who are experts in hormones is not someone who's just going to say, yeah, let me put you on testosterone and that's all you need, and that's going to be good enough, which is the way that I did it. Yeah. So that's not the way we want to do it. We want to look at all of the hormones, how they're playing together, and how we optimize all of them. So we're not disrupting the line of communication that's going on through every cell in our body. And I want to hit on bioidentical versus chemical. I think that's something that we need to really understand, because the problem is when it comes to the pharmaceutical chemical form of these hormones, they're not well recognized by the body. They can do some positive things. The girl client I was working with yesterday, her comment was she's on a pharmaceutical hormone and it really changed a lot of things that she was struggling with. It's great. But her comment was, do I need to stop it? Because is it that bad? So one, yes, it is that bad, right? It increases your potential for clots, for blood clots, right? It's not okay. There's bioidentical out there for a reason. We want to do the bioidentical. But also what I wasn't going to do is have her just jump off of it when she's not ready to jump onto the bioidentical. So, we've got to meet people where they are when it comes to where they, to these types of hormones. But what I told her is, like, this has got to be the top of your list. We have to get you on a bioidentical so it will optimize you throughout the rest of your life and not create more problems because it's the pharmaceutical grade, right? So I think that's really important, and finding someone who, when they're going to look at your labs, and they're going to look at all of your labs and all of them together from the lens of hormones and not the lens of just some, rando saying, okay, your lipids are elevated, we got to put you on a statin, or whatever the case may be. So we have to understand all of it together. Everything plays together. So please take that to heart. Please take the information that you get from your labs. Get really good panels. Most comprehensive metabolic panels are not really good panels unless you go to someone who does an extensive workup. Oftentimes we think they're extensive because they pulled a lot of blood, and they're really not that much. So we want as much information as possible, because our hormones influence everything, and everything influences the hormones, right? It goes back and forth. So we want to think about the environmental impacts on our hormones. We want to think about the stuff that we use on our body and in our body, and its impact on our hormones, and how all of that then is impacting everything else. So some of this may be a little bit repetitive. We could go so deep on this stuff, but I hope that you got some good information out of this to help you to know how to maybe dig in deeper, or know who to reach out to, or ask better questions, or questions at all about what it is that you need to do to elevate, right? To be the best that you can be, and to feel the best that you can. This is, we have this last, for those of us who are perimenopausal and menopausal, we have these years where we have, such wisdom, and we're finally figuring out who we are, and we want that to be optimized. I want to be the best that I can be. I want to be as good as I was in my 20s, but a lot more wise, because I did a lot of stupid things in my 20s. So, but taking that and really having that understanding, I think is what we need to be the best that we can. And it's one of the things that I was going to say too. I need to wrap this up, but I want to make sure that I say this, is that I am well aware that the pharmaceutical grade hormones are what are covered by insurance, and bioidentical as of yet are not, which is a huge problem. And I know it can get expensive, but we're trading good optimal health for we're trading good optimal health when it comes to the bioidenticals for what makes us feel better today, but how long is it going to help us to optimize? What is it going to do to us in time that is going to create more problems than good? And we've got to be able to balance that. So anyway, do your own research. dig in, if that's something that you enjoy and want to do, or find somebody who can dig in with you or for you, so you have an understanding of your body, your genetics, your hormones, what your options are, what's going to be best for you. And sometimes it's going to be multiple people, right? I think it's important that we have our teams. I have my team of people who I refer to. I have my team of people who help me in business. I have my team of people who help me in my own healthcare. And that's the stuff that is going to help me to optimize and do my best with bringing you the best information that I know how to bring you, as well as the people who are doing all of the right things and the good things in this world. So, God gave us amazing gifts, and we want to be able to utilize them, and we want to live well, we want to do well, and hormones play a huge role in that. So, let me know if there are questions that you have. If you have other thoughts on any of this, I'm happy to chat. You can go to my website, tastelifenutrition.com, and fill out an assessment. You can check out the Precision Blueprint, your Precision Wellness Blueprint. This is all the stuff that I'm talking about, right? This is how we figure out who you are from the inside out, what you need in order to optimize, because you're not anybody else. This is truly you, essentially on paper. And what do we need to do to on a daily basis, whether it's food, lifestyle, hormone management, chronic conditions, all of those things that we need to do to help you be the best you can possibly be. So check out your Precision Wellness Blueprint. It's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun doing this stuff and digging in deep with people. And then all the socials, right? Taste Life Nutrition on all the socials. And of course, we are here every week, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, streaming live on kuhsdenver.com. You can find us on the app when we're streaming live. You can also find us on all of the places, all over the world, wherever KUHS streams, and on all of the socials. So, thank you. And we'll see you here. I don't know about next week at this point. So if I'm here, great. If I'm not, I'm in Mexico. We'll see if that's actually going to happen or not. So, but anyway, let me know if there's anything you need. I'm here to serve, and we'll see you. If not next week, it will be the following. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you later.